Well, welcome to System Override. This week, we have some amazing stories to share with you. We went deep into some podcasts, some blogs, even Twitter. X. To find some really great topics to discuss today. Hey, Bri, have you had a great week?
I have had an interesting week, yes. We were stuck in California, and I just got home late last night, 3 days later from when we were trying to get back. California is not the worst place to be stuck, so that was nice. And we did get to see my sister-in-law and her husband more, which was also nice. But at the same time, 3 days when you were supposed to come home on Wednesday and then come home on Saturday night is a big difference.
That is.
And a bit of a pain in the butt. And I am not very impressed with WestJet. So this is a system override / rant on how shitty WestJet is now conversation. That was unbelievable.
And was it WestJet's, do you think it was WestJet's fault, or was it the way WestJet handled the situation that's currently going on in the U.S.?
Oh, definitely the way they handled it, for sure.
Yeah.
I have no idea what the reason was. They said it was weather, which I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah.
I've lived in Calgary my entire life. I have never not flown out of that airport. One time I was on a private flight out of Calgary where we should not have flown. The weather was so bad. We kept getting delayed. They were like de-icing and this and that. And we were watching plane crashes happen all over the place on the news. And I was like, we should not take off. And we still did. We still went. And so there's no way it was weather. And that's a total bullshit thing. But the way they handled it was insane. They literally just turned off the phones and said they kept pushing the flight and canceled it. And then we're just like, you tried to call and they'd be like, we are sorry. We are busy. Goodbye. And just hung up on you. And you're like, what?
That's just the craziest thing. And I see that in so many companies where they just, if they would just say to you,
honestly,
hey, you know what? All of us are aware that there are many things going on. It's a busy time of the year to be traveling. And just say, hey, things outside of our control, including this. But it was not weather. As we were back in Calgary, yes, we got snow.
Yes.
For a matter of a couple hours, not even.
No.
With your flight time.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, and that's the piss off is it's like, okay, well, I know why you're using weather because now you don't have to compensate me. And now I have to go chase the insurance company to compensate me for 3 extra days staying in LA, which is not cheap.
Not cheap.
And doing that to get home. And so it's just if you're going to screw me like that, at least put a few people on the phones just to be continually answering and saying, I'm so sorry. We are in process of rebooking flights right now. Just please stay tuned. We will get back to you right away. You'll get it, which we did get an email the next morning, which would have been helpful to know that that's what they were working on, or even if it was in the recorded message. We know we
should have been.
We will, even if you couldn't have someone answer, that's all you got to do, because I spent my whole evening being like, well, shit, how are we going to get home? And so I was calling because we booked through our credit card. And so through that, the travel, whatever. And so I was calling them. I'm looking up flights. A one way to get home for us, the flights are insane right now. I don't know what's happening because one way to get home would have cost more than the entire trip. It was anywhere from $4,000 to $10,000 for a one way flight for us to get home. And it would have took
home from
hours, 15 hours.
Flight.
My husband's like, well, we could go through Puerto Vallarta. And I go there for 8 hours because that's a flight to get home. It's just
what's going on in the world. Hey, that is crazy. But I'm glad you're home.
Yeah.
The good news is your team here did a great job. And we had some really good success last week. We are getting so close to having that product out. And we're super excited.
Very exciting. I can't wait. I'm going to be in test flight, right? As Shannon showed me how I needed to properly get into test flights. I can only go to one place. And so now I can actually get in there and figure out what I need to do.
Okay, let's go to last week's big action, which was asking our listeners to use AI in a different way than they've ever used it before. Did you have a chance on your vacation to do anything extra?
You know what? I did try out Claude Cowork right before I left. And when I was there, because I was like, I got no time, Claude. I've got a lot of shit going on. I need some help. And so I tried out Cowork, which I loved, and it was fantastic. So I'm going to definitely lean more into that. And I also just need to I need to build some agents for myself, but I haven't gone that far of having enough time to sit and do that. But yes, I did use Cowork, and it was
Yeah,
great.
that
10
is
out of
so
10.
great.
Yeah.
And, for anybody from Anthropic, we're just waiting for people that don't have a Mac to be able to get Coworker. And then,
Oh,
but
did you not get Cowork?
no. Yeah,
You would have been all
but
over it. Yes.
I would have, like, agents all
Yes.
over the place.
Yes.
But what I did learn is that Perplexity has a new, like, open claw type of service, which is called Computer, and it
Mm.
does some things like so it does similar to what Cowork does, but it
Mm.
uses multiple models too. So I've been playing around with that
Interesting.
this week.
Yeah.
Because I had to kinda set Perplexity aside because we don't necessarily have it,
Yeah.
inside, so I wouldn't use it for anything work related
Yeah.
at this moment, but it was really cool. So, like, being able
That's
to build it is exceptional,
yeah.
but I also heard a rumor that, Gemini like, that they're probably very close to, releasing their OpenClaw
Yeah.
type of service, which, of course makes sense to us that are in Google Workspace
Yeah.
because they already have access to all of our stuff
Totally.
anyways.
Yeah.
Now it's, secure as
Yeah.
you know with all of our drives, and wouldn't that be brilliant?
Yeah. That would be really
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah, so super cool. But
Mm.
one thing I did differently that I had never done before was we had a big brainstorming session the week before you left.
Mhm.
And we had all the transcripts, we had all the documentation, and I took all of that and put it into Gemini and sorry, no, I think I used Cloud actually. And I put it in there, a whole bunch of different assets, and got it to bring out like the themes and the
Mhm.
actual
Yeah.
kind of summarized all of the different assets that we had,
Yeah.
and it did a really good job. So it's not like we haven't used it to translate before, but not
Yeah.
when you have like four different speakers and all
Yeah.
kinds of, brainstorming and then throwing that idea out and start on the next one or adding to. It did a
Mhm.
really nice job of really dissecting what we had talked about.
Yeah, I used that for one of our client work ones where we
Yeah.
had multiple stakeholder conversations going on. So I kept putting in my source stuff and then I would drop in the combos and the transcripts. And
Yeah.
I think it does like quite a good job. And it has all that context, which I find it like extra, like there's less tweaking on the back end because it
Yeah.
just gets it that much closer. It can see like really get like aligned to what you were trying to say. So I like that system for sure.
It's really good for it.
Yeah.
So if anybody who hasn't used it for that, I think it's a really,
Yeah.
particularly for leaders who are kind of getting things from multiple things, or maybe it's different, maybe you've had 3 or 4 different conversations on the same topic and you want to
Mhm.
summarize that. It certainly gives you a good framework to start off of, and then you can tweak from there.
Yeah, and I find it's kinda like with people, the more context you can put to it, the better, so it's like if
Yeah.
you give it a few different, like, "Here's a doc I made, here's an email that was sent about it, here's the meeting transcript, here was the follow-up Slack message," and just, like, I take screenshots of stuff all the time, and I just, like,
Yeah,
pop it in, like, bloop, just to give it some of that extra context, and I find that that helps a lot with
it
the
is. It's really
yeah.
great. Okay, we got some great stories today. I'm
Yeah,
super
we do.
excited. So, Mr. Mark Cuban put out a tweet or an X this week, and it was a follow up on a Fortune story about how really companies are starting to think about work differently with AI, and that actually the outcomes are more important than the hours that an employee puts in during the week.
Mhm,
And that, Mark's comment was less hours, same pay, greater outcomes.
mhm.
What are you thinking about this topic?
I love this topic because this is exactly what we believe in and are trying to drive towards is that future of AI where it's not something that is a negative take your jobs away kind of a situation, but it's an empowering tool that can
Mhm.
then, put people towards, better time spent, better ways to manage their time, better day, better this, better that. And now we're seeing the next step of that where it's like actually less time at work, but better. So it's just like
But
what
better
we talked
outcomes.
about, like, I don't know, when we started League, I remember we were talking about like the future of AI and then joking about like a utopian society where it's like, you get to the point where your work life balance is actually switching and your work time is needing to be less and your lifetime gets to be more, but it gets to be enabled because of AI. So you're still
Mhm.
doing high quality work, same kind of outcomes, better outcomes actually, and exceeding outcomes, but being able to create a new renaissance era of life, and
Yeah.
that's my rainbow
This
gilded
is our
dream of what
utopia
AI
for
could look like.
sure.
Yeah.
For sure. And I love that we're starting to surface these kind of ideas because this is the stuff that helps people think about the future. Because it is difficult for people
Yeah.
to just go from with a blank slate and thinking AI is going to make my life look like this. And
Mhm.
so you need people, particularly people that are noted for their success in business and their ability to kind of predict which trends are going to be successful versus
Yeah.
not successful. And obviously, Mark does a great job of that, whether it's, in Shark Tank or in his own businesses.
Mhm.
So I love that. And what I do think, though, is again, companies like this that decide to use this will actually really move forward quickly
Yeah.
because it could be a differentiator, right?
Yeah.
If you only had to work, maybe you only had to work
Mhm.
35 hours a week versus 40, and your outcomes were really more about your really great human skills because you could layer that on top of the
Mhm.
AI, like that is where your smartest people are going to want to go to
Totally.
thrive. And my
Yeah.
experience with big corporations, they're going to be the last to
Yeah.
move on that, which, worries me a little bit about the quality of the employees
More.
that they're gonna have.
Totally. Well, and I think the thing too is it's like I think there's that negative view of like, oh, well, they'll just push us to do more for more.
Yeah.
But I think like the nice thing I think we need to get into in that like, companies setting the kind of position point of this. And I also think companies that are like fast moving, fast paced in tech, you understand like we're in tech. We are a startup. We run really hard all the time, but we know the cost that that takes on us
Right.
individually as humans. And so we try to put that back to the team as far as having the rest, having the breaks, because like I just frankly like I'm a human being, not a robot. My brain works better when I actually get rest and time away from work. Like I am a better person at work. I have better ideas. I have better outputs. I'm faster to get things
Mhm.
done because when your brain is so overloaded with so many things, you kind of just get into that like frenetic freeze state of just like, and you
That's
feel like
right.
you're pushing things along, but you're not actually getting any outcomes. It
Yeah.
just turns into busy work. And I think when you've been in tech, you know what that feels like. And when you're in corporate, you're not moving at as fast as a pace. You're not pushing your people. People aren't moving as fast as that. And the timelines are a lot longer. So maybe you don't understand as well. Like more for more is not an equation. Like in that way, like actually having less time creates bigger, like leaps,
Yeah.
so you can just like move ahead, move ahead, move ahead. Because what I find, and we've certainly seen and felt it in tech, is like you get on that hamster wheel and you actually just start doing this, and you're like, we're not
Yeah.
actually going anywhere. We're just running really hard, really fast.
Yeah, and as you're a startup, you know that
Yeah.
if you're not going anywhere, that's like the
Yeah.
death wheel.
Yeah,
So you've
exactly. You
gotta
have
be
to keep
moving
moving
forward
ahead.
every day because
Yeah,
you have limited runways in many
exactly.
sometimes it's timing of product releases, sometimes it's
Yeah.
cash, like, there's always a multiple things that you're running out of runway
Hmm.
for. The
Yeah.
one thing as you were saying that too, like, this concept is not new because when you dig back into some of Netflix's success from 20 years ago, well, maybe 15 years ago, they, gave employees unlimited vacation, right? They
Hmm.
didn't stay. And what they did that for was so people could go away and do different things, get their brain into a different mode.
Yeah.
And then when they came back, they were so much more creative, just
Yeah.
came up with way bigger ideas, and it moved the business forward,
Yeah.
very quickly in a world where they were disrupting something that didn't exist
Yeah.
before. So
Well, and I think you just said something important was the word creative. Like the future of work with AI is moving into a more creative space. Like you're
mhm,
using your creative brain, not necessarily your, just your
task.
process brain
Yeah.
anymore. And so as someone, so like I started out, I'm a very artsy person. I went to art school originally. I was gonna, be a Disney animator. I wasn't gonna work for the man, all that. Like, haha to me, look where I wound up.
Now you are the man.
Yeah, yeah, they try to become the man. But with that, like, I understand what it's like to be a creative. And so, like, you can't just like, you think of, like, you watch a movie about a writer, right? And they have writer's block and they're tormenting themselves and
Mm,
they can't just write. And so I think that's one thing that is an important concept for people to understand is like when you're thinking of problem solving, these creative solutions, everything's moving fast and we're removing away that work that doesn't require as much of the
mhm.
creative brain and increasing the capacity and the need for the creative brain in people's roles. You need to be able to align that more to what the creative process is. And the
Yeah.
creative process is not like this. It's like peaks and valleys. Like you are really have a breakthrough and you're doing this, and then you have to just ruminate and kind of like, be in a space doing whatever until those things kind of come back or can create the kind of propulsion, whether it's through like collaboration or brainstorm sessions with teams or like other ways of stimulation versus just pounding out deliverables because it just won't work that way.
Yeah, which I think is very cool, and I want all of our listeners to really think about that. Hold on to that idea till we get to the big action this week because it may play a part in how you see work going forward. So let's jump over to our next story, which is Confirm launched an AI native HR agent that, is probably the first on the market like this. For those of you listening that aren't familiar with Confirm, they're an HRIS type system, do the standard type things like performance reviews and keep coaching and all those things that HR teams need to use. But what the native agent did was it actually is there to serve the employee and really help differentiate on performance and find some hidden sort of what is doubted as maybe underperformers that should have been, maybe weren't high performers due to biases, due to, the way that they interact with on the human side, but maybe their productivity and stuff isn't as good. And so it takes a wide range of different systems that an employee might use, like Slack and email and messaging, and uses all those things to come up with some information for the leadership team, spits out things about coaching, things that they might want to think about as an employee to really elevate their performance and help the company see where they are really at on an analysis of their performance across the whole company. What are you thinking about this one, Brie?
I have mixed feelings about this in the sense I think the concept of taking away bias and being able to leaders are up here and like I think employees sometimes think that they're paying so much more attention to them and then can't understand when like that doesn't happen because like leaders aren't always like as paying attention to those things or is in it as you would like them to be or maybe doing the check-ins that would kind of do that. So I think one thing, it's cool to have something that can bridge that gap, but I think at the same time, it feels very surveillance. And so I don't know how well employees are going to like that, especially in things that are supposed to be like, I feel like it might erode trust. Like there's that gap of like, why should I trust this? And so I think there could be a huge stall out of people being like, I don't know. And like, also, what if this is negative for me? Like, what if
Right.
I don't you to see what like maybe I don't know how you're going to interpret it. Like I think that's the thing. If like I can see employees just being like, I have a lot of questions. Like, how are you evaluating
Yeah.
this? Like, how are you doing this? Blah, 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 and just kind of freaking out about it. So I don't love it from that perspective. And I think there's a lot of opportunity for it to go wrong without a lot of guardrails. I think I just have more questions right now. But I think the
Hmm.
concept of bridging the gap of being able to create more opportunity and less bias is cool. How it will work in practicality, again, what do you think?
Yeah, so many things that you came to mind as you were talking about that. I think first of all, I want everybody on the podcast to know we haven't used the Confirm tool yet. But one of the things I was thinking about, which we often talk about here, is that middle manager and that role being super hard for you know for people. It's a really tough role. And without good leadership above you, you may not be getting what you need to develop as a manager. And I thought, well, maybe this really helps them because, if it's giving good output and they're feeling like they know where they could improve, they know what they get some, AI generated coaching and feedback to them without having to wait on their leader to do so. I think that might be pretty interesting because, I've been thinking a lot as we're building league, I've been thinking a lot about how we help that middle manager type of a role, that kind of first, second level of management. And how do we help them? Because they do seem to have been stranded over the last, maybe decade and not getting the kind of support that they need in that role. So I'm interested to see what happens there because sometimes they don't know all the answers. Sometimes this makes it really easy to go into the AI and get the answers. That might make it easier for them to be successful.
Yeah, I do like that thought in the sense because we've talked a lot about how that's a really hard layer of leadership because you have
Mhm.
both roles. You're usually a doer. You also are managing people. You haven't elevated up to where you're like not doing in some capacity. You're also managing both sides of the workforce. So I think you're right. Any tool that can help support that from being such a broken lens of leadership,
Yeah.
because you see a lot of issues come up from that because you put a lot of accountability and pressure on that level of the organization without a lot of resources or tools or
Exactly.
anything. And so if there is a tool for them to support, I think you're bang on that that will
Yeah.
be helpful.
And you know where it might be also helpful is some of the other thing we've talked about is really identifying people that were put into leadership roles that
Yeah.
it's just not the right fit. And so often their leader above them doesn't have the courage to have that conversation or doesn't have the data to,
Mhm.
maybe knows it in their gut and their heart, but doesn't know how to really talk about it
Yeah.
with them. And I really see a world going forward where we get much more particular about who we put into leadership because we've been able to elevate and create a different pathway for subject matter experts with AI
Mhm.
and making their job just as lucrative, just as satisfying, and not that everybody has to be a leader. So I'm kind of interested that this might do something like that as well.
Well, and I think like that is important because people just want to be a leader because that means promotion. You know what I mean? And how
Right.
do you get promotion without that? And how do we change? Because on if I reflect on some of the teams that I've been on, probably the best person to be the frontline leader was the one of the lowest performing as
Mhm.
far on the team. So on a few, actually quite a few teams, they had very much the people skills. They had the maybe more politicking type skills. They were not good at the actual doing of the work. And so it's an
Mhm.
interesting dynamic. And like, how do you start communicating that norm in the organization that people like leadership roles are for, depending on, obviously the team, sometimes that's not applicable, but generally it's for a people leader needs
Yeah.
to be in that role. And like, and almost isn't like a two-pronger job where you have the people leader and then you have a subject matter expert who sits at the same level who can be the top
Right.
tier C? And I think that's
Exactly.
probably the better because usually the
I
subject matter
love that.
expert is the worst at people leading, but
Yeah.
they're the ones who get promoted. And then they're also unhappy too because they don't like the people stuff necessarily. They like the work itself. And so the
Yeah.
higher they move up, the more miserable they're going to be and the more they're going to hate their
Exactly.
job. And so how do you think of that as a two-part track where you actually kind of have a partnership of running teams, but then subject matter expertise not having to sit under one house?
Exactly. Which I think there's something there. I think that is probably one of the most fundamental shifts we're going to see in workforce structures in the next couple of years. And I'm super excited about that because I don't think I think leadership is super hard. I think it is things, people get to become leaders and they're not happy. An unhappy leader
Yeah.
leads to a whole but a bunch of other unhappy people.
Yeah. That's the thing, and it's like it's also, like, it's super hard, and it's not for everyone. Like,
No.
it's just like, okay, so you look at teachers, you look at people running you look at high school teachers. Would you wanna be a high school teacher? Do you think you could be a teacher, could do that job? You're like, "Absolutely not." Should you be a leader then? Because it's a lot like that. You know what I mean? Like, there's a
Mhm.
lot of just people. There's a lot of just managing different feelings. There's a lot of feelings, to be honest, in leadership.
There's a
There's a
lot of
lot of
feelings.
feelings, there's a lot of managing people, there's a lot of managing situations. And that is not for everyone, and there's nothing wrong with that, but it's like, if you don't align to that, if that's not something that you kind of lights you up or you like the driving those outcomes
Mhm.
so kind of in that way, you're gonna hate that
Yeah.
kind of leadership, like, you're gonna loathe it. And so, and then it's the people who are going to pay for it are the people underneath of you. And then like it
Totally.
just creates this cascading effect of misery. And so I think it's so important that we start really looking at what do leaders need to be in a different way. And I think this two-track thing, if we can just like normalize the fact of there being a subject matter expert lean and a leader, because I think that's the thing is if you were to promote the person who truly be a good people leader and they're not the subject matter expert and maybe one of the lower performers on the team, everyone underneath is going to rage because
Yes.
the classic, mentality is the best shall rise. And
Right.
so how do you create a bit of a different conversation?
The other problem that solves is like so often when I've led like sales teams in
Mhm.
particular, there's probably, and mostly you see it in sales teams because we can measure salespeople right
Mhm.
like down to the penny. But, it'll happen in operational teams as well, where the top, leaders may actually do the opposite and shy away from promoting
Yeah.
their top people
Yeah. You get
because right? Now if they're thinking selfishly about their KPIs and outcomes, they're like, I
yeah.
can't put that person into another job or let
Yeah.
them move over to another team because now my performance drops on my team. And like that's very short-sightedness. That person shouldn't be a leader, in my
Yeah.
humble opinion, because leaders get excited. The best leaders get excited about helping new people thrive and
Yeah.
helping new people get to the top. And if you're doing leadership well, you should be able to that should be constantly people rising to the
Mhm.
best salespeople.
Mhm.
But we know that that isn't actually how most people lead,
For sure.
and I think lots of people get over, you know, pushed down, not promoted, not
Yeah.
sponsored because people are worried about self preservation, which I
Mhm.
totally get. That's what companies
Mhm.
do. They make sure that you are measured on things that, or your compensation is tied to the things that you are responsible for. Therefore, you won't
Yeah.
get compensated if you don't achieve them.
Yeah.
Right?
Exactly.
Yeah. So that's an interesting one. We'll see how that one continues to evolve over the next little bit. And then the last one is we touched on this a couple weeks ago, which is about the cost of these AI agents. Coworks all the rage, anything that's come using this open claw type of technology to build agents. The cost, the numbers are coming in. These things, with the current compute costs are costing, six figures minimum to
Mhm.
run for a year. And I think that's catching some CEOs and,
Sure.
and boards off, a little bit out of, sidelining them or hitting them, blindsiding them.
Yeah.
That's the word I'm looking for because they weren't quite quoted that when they got into the enterprise type models. As a CEO, what are you thinking about these costs and do you think they're worth it?
I mean, yeah. So, like, one, as a company who is building a product that, utilizes this kind of technology, you need to understand the unit economics attached to it. And it's not cheap right now when you get into usage. And, like, that's
Mhm.
how it is measured is through usage. So, the more you're using, more hits on the system, the more you're
Mhm.
paying for it. And I don't know if that's as well understood by some of these companies who are just adopting it, that it's not like a flat rate price and it's not like normalized. Like, if you start going in there and really and it's also not at a place where it's really cost effective, yet to run a bunch of this stuff. That said, it very quickly will be. You know what I mean? Like
Mhm.
it very quickly will be. And so I think yes, it is going to be a bit of a sticker shock and yes, it is going to be a bit surprising that it's actually not cheaper. It might be more expensive right now
Yeah.
than what you're finding individuals are. But I think it's very nearsighted to be getting like if you were to throw the baby, like it would be very throwing the baby out with the bathwater. If you were to just do a whole switch back and say, "Oh God, it's going to be too much," because this, as with anything, the price of this is they're going to optimize and optimize and optimize this down so that the
Yeah.
price is, very low. And if you have not implemented this into your organization in a meaningful way, I think you are going to very much lose out in the long run. So don't make that mistake. Like this isn't going anywhere. You look at these major companies, everyone's using it, governments are, doing deals for this. Like it's not going anywhere. So how can you bring this into your business in a way that makes sense? But I think also this is like a good tempering maybe of like throwing out all your people in place of AI too, because
Right.
that's not the appropriate answer either. And so like maybe this is a good news story in the sense of saying, hey, maybe I shouldn't just like swap one for one. And maybe I
Yeah.
do need to think about this a little bit more and how we can, I know I need it, but how can I apply it in a way that makes sense and that aligns with, the costs that our business needs to incur because it's not going to be a one for one and it shouldn't be a one for one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I heard something really interesting that Jensen, the CEO of NVIDIA, said this past week at his keynote speak at his conference, which was his new expectation of his engineers. Like, obviously, NVIDIA is the highest, like the largest, most valuable company in the world. And his engineers are probably the best in the world, right? It compensates them really well. He said, like, I'm keeping compensation the same.
Mhm.
I'm the same number of engineers, but I'm
Mhm.
now measuring their success on spending at least $250,000 tokens or compute a year in addition to that, as saying, like, we want you to use this, we want you to spend this money, because from that, if I've got the right people in the chairs, they should
Mhm.
be able to use that creativity, that really humanistic side of thinking to develop and build new things. Because obviously the world relies on NVIDIA now to run this entire AI thing. A little bit risky there. But yeah, so like that's a really interesting way of not being afraid necessarily of the cost, but embracing it and encouraging people to spend the money, but also expecting them to get to a different outcome that they couldn't have got before.
Yeah. Well, and I think this is really interesting because I think for companies that this is going to become like a competitive positioning for talent,
Mhm.
in that way. Like, I think it'll move to where it's going to be the equivalent of like, are you on a typewriter or are you on a laptop? You know what I mean? Companies though don't. It's like, are you going to be the employee who wants to go work somewhere where you still have to do a 5 day a week, 8 to 9 hours a day on their shitty old tools, the manual way? Or are you going to want to go to a company that is invested in the infrastructure to enable your work the same way we brought in computers, where you can do your workday in 3 hours or 3 days a week and get paid the same and have a better
Yeah.
life? Like, I think that's where this is going to move towards, is like companies that invest in that are actually creating a competitive advantage for talent. And for those who stay behind, you're really going to be behind in many regards.
Yeah, and I think you add another layer on that. Like, I even know for myself, when I get time in a day to think about something bigger, something that doesn't exist today, like that actually drives me to want to do more
Hmm.
than, a day where I'm stuck just doing tasks and stuff like that. I don't think that that is everybody in the world, but there's definitely a significant number of workers that measure their happiness and success at work on the impact they think they're having, and
Hmm.
tasks don't tend to have the same kind of impact with or get the same emotional reaction from our brains and our hearts as we work through them versus like, oh my God, that idea is really cool. I wonder where, can we take this somewhere? Does this like, how do I bring this to life to test it with customers? Like, there's so many cool things that can happen by being able to do that. And those employees like thrive.
Yeah, for sure. Very much thrive. And I think either way, like, you're going to have the ones who thrive with that time to do better things. And I think coming up with new ideas is one thing, optimizing is another, catching up is another. Like, there's just so many other ways that a lot of use types of people would be able to value that time that's still for the benefit of the
Mhm.
company, but in a way that like they feel very engaged at work. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Or even if it's in collaboration with other team members or other parts of the organization, because even if they are having more stakeholder maybe connections instead of like actual outputs, that
Yeah.
can propel, further things because, oh, now I understand more about that part of the business. I've made a
Yeah.
connection to something that I do. Shoot, well, now we've improved this little tweak and now, that's not going to be a miss or whatever that needs to look like. So I think there's a lot of opportunity there, no matter how employees are going to. And I think the most important thing too for companies is not to police it too much out of the gate. Like, let it kind of flow a
Yeah.
bit and see how people are utilizing their time when that is the case, and see what you're getting back out of it. See who's doing really good at it and see where you might need to give some framing or guidance, because you can't just expect everyone's going to wander the
Yeah.
right way all at once
Of
together.
course.
And so, how can you create that more observation, less knee jerk reaction and judgment around it? And then really measure from it to
Mhm.
get a real idea of what's going on and how you can implement that in your business versus just making assumptions. Because I think the second a lot of businesses see someone, oh, I saw you go for coffee 5 times today.
Yeah.
That's it. It's gone. You know what I mean? And so how do we temper that reaction a little bit?
Yeah, I do love that though, like, because actually when you give people the freedom, it's
Yeah.
been actually proven that they actually take less breaks
Yeah.
because they know they have the freedom and
Yeah.
they're not, like, set to that schedule, but people
Yeah.
get so messed up on, "Oh, take your time, break,"
Yeah.
breaks, work from this moment to this moment. When you
Yeah.
actually give humans the freedom to do that what they need to do and get the output, we get so much, you know, so much better environment, and they actually do a great job.
Yeah.
So,
I
you know
mean, my own boss now and I don't ever stop. You know what I mean? It's
right?
just like I could take
Yeah.
as much time off as I want if I
Mm,
technically wanted
right,
to.
but that's exactly what it doesn't
Yeah.
work that way, which is why
Yeah.
entrepreneurs have always been very successful, if you now, I say if you're weren't cut out to be an entrepreneur and don't act that way,
Yeah.
then obviously your business isn't gonna fail or is gonna
Yeah.
fail, but that's just not the case from so many people
Yeah.
who just actually need to be given the opportunity to do
Yeah.
this, and, like, with AI, as a co-pilot with your career, I think you can achieve so many cool things.
Well, and I think ownership too. Like a big thing
Yeah.
of people doing that is just feeling like you have ownership. Like if you don't feel like you have ownership over something, you just don't connect to it the same way. If it's just like, Shannon, this is yours. This is
Yeah.
your house. This is your house to make work, to be successful. I don't think there's a single human being who's like, I don't like feeling proud of something and I like looking
Exactly.
like shit and not like doing a good job of something. Like most
Exactly.
people will rise to that occasion and most people will take a great like, if you give people the opportunity to feel like they own something and are accountable for it and to be very proud of it, most of them will step into
I agree.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay, that seems like a really good place to end that one. So let's go over to our big action for the week. This week, we're talking about future casting the job. What do you think your job will look like in a couple of years?
What will it look like in a couple of years?
Yeah, I don't know that it's a question. I was kind of throwing it out there. I don't think you actually have to answer that question right now because you're going to have to answer it next week when
I
we
know,
record. But it is something you can't just like,
I
come up with
know.
an answer like that.
Well, and I really gotta, you gotta lean into it because it's like for me, it's probably like the most valuable parts of my job are more being out there and
Mm,
making the connections and the stakeholders and doing all of that. But then there's so much behind the scenes or in the office that needs done. And so I'm gonna think about this more, but I think my early thinking is that a lot of that's gonna be taken care of with my little agents, and so, like, I can really
right,
max my time where it should be spent and also in front of the team, as far as, like, a rah-rah
right.
cheerleader, not a manager, but, like, just being there in that way to support and to drive things as needed that way.
Yeah, right? Like a C-suite, if we get to spend more time with humans
Yeah.
and not just the strategic ones that,
Yeah.
you always, but to actually be able to have more time up and down the
Can I
company,
go to Jack's?
I think that that would be amazing,
Yeah,
right?
for
Like
sure.
that's a very cool. Like, remember we met that gentleman a couple months ago that he talks about he runs a factory, like
Yeah.
builds big equipment. Remember he said like he knows everybody in his organization. He goes out and says good morning to them every morning, right? Like he values that interaction time and
Yeah.
his employees, like his turnover is almost nothing.
Yeah. Well, and I think
Pretty
from a
cool.
leader's perspective, like I had a director who used to do that when I worked at an oil and gas company. And he would walk the floor every morning and say hi to everyone and
Hmm.
this and that. And at the company I was at, like director felt like high up, like enough that it
Yeah.
felt like special. You know what I mean? And so he
Yeah.
had, my goodness, I've got a child here.
Hey, Arthur. Arthur, I don't see any emojis.
In a
Arthur always gives us some emojis while we're on a call, so it's always fun.
But it just I think as a leader, you don't realize how much your impact has on the people who work for you, and having that
Mhm.
even just the fact that you took time to say hello or to like, we're so busy
Yeah,
all the time. I think you're just blowing in and you're just, like, trying to get your stuff done and do all of that, but just, like, checking in, saying hi, having a bit of a hangout. How was
yeah,
people's weekend? Like, I think you just don't realize how much that means to people that you actually care about them.
yeah, and it's
Yeah.
it sounds really easy to do,
Yeah.
however, it isn't. It's not. It does take some time and some and actually some change probably in your day, because
Yeah.
probably what do most leaders do when they first get in? They check their calendars and their email, and, like, they that consumes a whole hour of time is gone.
Yeah.
And then their team is in and working and it's yeah,
Yeah.
so that's just an example, but So what we want everybody to do is really think about like your ideal job 2 years from now. What kind of role does AI play in it? What are you doing? Are you working as many hours as you do today? Maybe you're working more, maybe you're working less. I don't know, but really think about it, because one of the things that in our research at League is that you're always working towards something, but what if that something doesn't exist?
Mhm.
And something better exists. Like I said, I was talking to a group on Wednesday, and they were like, wow, we're kind of nervous about losing our jobs and stuff. AI might take over. So we've been a little hesitant. And I said, okay, just want to turn your attention to when the dot-com bubble, like the dot-com era at the beginning of this century, and then all of the, cell phone technology and laptop technology came in over the last 20 years. I had news for you guys. The YouTube influencer job did not exist.
Mhm.
Millionaires were not on YouTube back then, and they are today, right? So I think there's like this whole iteration of jobs that we could think of and create and then work towards. And
Yeah.
be as crazy as you want about what that really job would look like, and try to be so creative in how you come up with that job, because we'd love to hear about them in comments next week.
Maybe I'm gonna be an AI bot. I'll just, like, personify
Maybe.
myself as an AI bot. That'll be my next iteration of job. I don't know why I
Yeah,
went to bobblehead. That's what I thought of for
you
some
could be
reason.
a
Like, a
bobblehead.
head of me,
You could be on your dashboard, little
right?
Bri, bobblehead. And it'll be like a bot telling you where you're going, what you're doing, what you have to do today. It's perfect. So anyways, have fun with that, listeners. As usual, if you enjoyed this episode, which we hope you do, please subscribe, follow, share, comments in the channel. We love to hear your comments, and we'll see you next week.
See ya.